Okay. This is Dan Hockey, who, for those of you who don't know, who is our now superintendent of the Clermont County Board of Development and Disabilities. And Dan wanted to come and talk at the beginning of this meeting, and then we can start the presentation after that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I wasn't on the agenda, so I appreciate Rachel giving me just a couple minutes. I wanted to very quickly just draw your attention to something that's kind of a hot topic in the state right now, related to, what I've handed you is just actually a screenshot off of our Ohio Association of County Boards website. And if you go to the Ohio Association of County Boards, if you Google that, you can obviously pull that up. Real hot button issue right now is the topic of what's been introduced in the state budget, which is the possibility of the elimination of independent providers for being an available possibility for individuals. This is for waiver services moving. It would really begin in 2016 and would carry through the year of 2019. Certainly it's been kind of, and I don't, have any of you heard about this? Has that come up as far as anything? Okay, I'm sure. It's something that certainly is out there right now. The reason I wanted to share this with you is our trade association, which is the County Boards Association. They are actually surveying individuals, families, providers to get feedback on people's just to get feedback on their thoughts related to this topic, and then they're sharing this with the legislators. This isn't a done deal yet, but it is something that certainly legislators want to hear from folks, and this is kind of our method to be able to do that for you. So if you look in the very middle of this page, and you'll have to go to the website, but I wanted to print this out for you. This is your opportunity. It says here, click here to access the OACB survey. If you would like to do that, good morning. You can go to that website, click on that, and you can actually offer feedback at that site. And that's kind of how we're directing folks to be able to do that if that is an interest of yours. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes to share that with you. I didn't want to take a lot of time because Rachel's got a lot of time to, she's got a lot to share with you today related to the behavior support rule and some of the changes there. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have right off the bat quickly. And I also left my card over here on the table, so if you want to take one of those and want to call me or email me, if I don't know the answer, I'll try and find it for you. But if it's something that I can help out with, I'd certainly be interested in doing that as well.
Can she get one of your?
Yeah, sorry about that. And I'll leave the rest of these over there on the table as well. So it's good to see you all this morning. So looking forward. Obviously, I've been with the county board here in Clermont for about 5 years. I've worked in Clermont for years, so I'm certainly looking forward to maybe getting to know you a little better as we kind of go down the road. But if you have any questions, my card's over there, and be happy to help out any way I can. All right.
Thanks.
Have a good training. Thanks.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. So Dan mentioned that I'm going to share some information about the behavior support rule, which I am, coincidentally. This is really about positive culture, which I think is a required training it's still a required training for providers. And so I do have a PowerPoint, which some of you have probably seen some of this before. I did add a few new videos in and that sort of thing. But I am going to talk a little bit about the new behavior support rule. And you do have some information that here, in addition to the PowerPoint, that talks about the new rule, because the new rule is quite congruent with the Positive Culture Initiative that began a few years back. In fact, it really probably wasn't before, and it is much more so now. With no other explanation, we're gonna go through the PowerPoint and talk about some of these things. So what is or was the Positive Culture Initiative, and what is it now? it is intended to bring about lasting change within our system. It emphasizes the true work of caregiving. What does it mean to support people? What does it mean to be a caregiver? And what does it mean to help people in the environments that they choose be successful? It's really that simple. It opens the door for new conversations about what people want and need from us, right? So what can we do to help you? It is a shift away from focusing exclusively on challenging behavior or what is important for the person, right? To focusing on building a culture and practices that support good lives, addressing what is important to and for the person. So if I were to ask you guys, what is the difference between what is important to and what is important for the person? So when we say what is important to the person, what do we mean?
Health and safety.
Probably important for the person, not necessarily important to the person. And this is that shift, right? That's a perfect example of that shift. Of course we need to focus on health and safety, right? Which is very important for somebody. What is important to people is something a little bit different.
That they're treated equal to everybody else.
Maybe.
Personal goal kind of thing.
Yeah, so what is it that you desire? What is it that you want in life? Because not everybody wants the same thing, right? And there are probably very few people who want exactly the same thing. And then what is important for the person helps us design that so that it's safe, and that we're meeting your needs so that you can access what's important to you. Does that make sense? Okay. It's a shift away from here's how to do it, saying here's the way you need to do this, right? We're going to sign you up for a day program and you're going to learn work skills, and then maybe someday you can participate in an employment services program in which you get coaching, and then from there, you might have a full-time job, but if you're not successful there, here's the other thing you're going to do, right?
Sit at home.
As opposed to, we can learn to do this together and support people in achieving what is important to them. So it's a shift away from here's how you do it, to let's work on this together. Let's hear from you, and let's design our supports around what's important to you and what's important for you. Which is, you will see is very congruent with the other handouts that you have regarding the new behavior support rule. I have to be careful because sometimes I can talk a lot, so I'm going to try to stay focused. What is a positive culture? It's an intentional way of supporting people that focuses on truly knowing and valuing the person, creating healthy relationships, helping people achieve their desired goals and outcomes, acknowledging the difficulties they face, and offering encouragement and support, and providing safe interactions during times of crisis. Right? That sounds pretty ideal, and that's really what we want to do. And that's what a positive culture is all about. So here are some core concepts. If we change the way we see people who are affected by disabilities, then we will change our approach to supporting them. Because there's been a long road of cultural development which we feel people with developmental disabilities need to be taken care of, right? As opposed to listened to and supported. It's not that we don't believe that. It's just this is how we do it, and often it becomes this is how you're going to do it, as opposed to what's important to you and what's important for you. Difficult behaviors are messages about the kind of life the person is living. It's not something that we need to control, it's something we need to study, right? What is going on? If we focus on helping the person engage in the life they want, other issues become a little less important. Because if people are happy, right? All right. And the change we seek is within ourselves as caregivers rather than the person supported. So we need to keep our eye, we need to, this is a culture that has developed over many, many years, so it's going to take some time for this culture to change, in which we are the caregivers, you are the person we are caring for, we know best, you don't, right? And so it's going to take us some time to just be reminded of this change in thought process over the years. We all struggle. We do. As DD employees, providers struggle, parents struggle, because we've all been taught over the years that this is the way we do things. And so I was online, believe it or not, just this morning, looking at some videos on this website called Deimagine. And this is a website that is developed by a gentleman named David Petoniak. I believe he's a psychologist, actually. And he just has some really cool perspectives to share. So I am going to share some of his perspectives. And I think I'm going to do this one if it works for me. If I'm in the right place. And I'm not. Hang on a minute. Was working a minute ago. I might have to go out and go back in, so bear with me. So here are some of his perspectives that I think are quite relevant.
Ours is a social brain. We are hardwired to belong. And increasingly, scientists are understanding this in ways that weren't possible before. The neurosciences now are making it really clear that our brain doesn't think about relationships from time to time. Our brain is preoccupied with relationships. In fact, it's kind of understood or commonly understood that about 80% of what our brain is up to at any given point in time is thinking about our social relationships. And we're not focused on a specific task that requires a specific kind of attention. Our brain is pretty much thinking about our social network, who are the people that are around us, where are the people we know, what are they doing, what am I supposed to be doing for them, what are they going to be doing for me. We're preoccupied with it. Often people who are lonely are acting out because of this loneliness. I think it's the most common cause of problem behaviors in people is their isolation. It's not disability, but it's the isolation that often results from disability. People have several strategies, one of which is if they act out, then they're noticed by the rest of the pack. The philosopher said one time, it's better to have bad breath than no breath at all. And often, my wife Cindy always says, it's almost as if people are afraid they'll disappear, and if they aren't waving their arms in front of us, they will physically disappear from our view. If you can't imagine who this person would be in the absence of their problem behaviors, then with all due respect, you're part of the problem. Because often people, they are so lonely, they have acted out for so long, they can't imagine who they could be in the rest of the pack, in their connection to the rest of the pack. Another strategy people have is they often mask their own competence. They act like they don't know how to do things because what that does is it gets people to help them, and when they have no... So here's a way that scientists are now thinking of it that's just fascinating. At any given point in time, we are literally reading and picking up all kinds of signals from the people around us. Some of them visual, some of them we're processing language, we're hearing inflections in voices, we're hearing certain choices of words, and making all kinds of incredible discriminations about what's taking place in the minds of others from that. But there's even more data than that coming our way. It's thought that we're giving off chemicals that we read from one another. And as importantly, I'm giving off chemicals, you're giving off chemicals, and those chemicals are colliding about mid-space between the two of us. And then we're reading the data from that collision of chemicals, that reaction in the two chemical streams. Some people believe we're giving off subatomic vibrations that literally we resonate with or connect with a similar kind of rhythm or pattern. It's way more complex, in short, than they ever dreamed. There's smells we give off. There's all kinds of data that is coming our way. And the theory is that whether we're typical in our development or not, whether we are skilled in relationships or not, the data is coming to our bodies, being read by our brains. But then the real question is the thinking brain, the neocortex, a very thin layer of brain on the top of our frontal lobes. It's a tenth of an inch thick, but it's processing our sense of what's taking place right now in the present time. It's what we're doing as we talk with one another. Dave is doing as he's making adjustments in camera, whatever it might be. All of that's being processed in the prefrontal cortex. And whether we can pick up the signals, actually use the data that's coming to us, is determined by how engaged we are in the prefrontal cortex. And that's determined by whether we're afraid or not. So if I'm afraid, I literally can't read the data that's coming my way. And so now think about people who experience disabilities, who are very anxious, who have had perhaps experience in their past of failed relationships, who now are meeting people and getting the data, but they can't decipher the data, they can't interpret the data, they can't make determinations about what their next step might be, not because they didn't get the data, but because they literally can't interpret it. There's even an interesting study recently that shows that people that have had Botox therapy are less empathetic after the Botox therapy. Because when I see you smiling as you are now, Patty, it makes me smile. And when my mouth moves in that smile formation, there's chemical processes that are taking place that help me to actually feel part of what you're feeling. And if I can't move my face that way anymore, I literally don't get that chemical data. So that was, all of this is to say it's more complicated than they ever thought. It's way more than just visual information, auditory information.
Okay, I'm going to stop that and I'm going to go back because that is not the one I wanted to show, but very interesting and still, and still about what happens to people when we don't appreciate what they need, right? All people. He's talking about all people and what happens to people when we don't appreciate what they need and we kind of blow people off or we think we know best. You know, it's life-changing because it's brain-changing. It's all about neuroscience and neurology, and there is a lot of research out there that confirms that people's brains are impacted by life experiences. I am going to, here, this one is also one that's very relevant.
People need to be in relationships, and what we keep as a field we need them as coverage. And there's a huge difference between coverage and relationships. And that example that I use all the time is, imagine I were to arrive home after a trip, and instead of finding my lovely wife Cindy at home, there'd be another woman. I'd say, you know, where's Cindy? And can you imagine how I feel if she said, well, Cindy's not here, but don't worry, we have you covered. People always laugh at that.
They like that one.
Laugh right out loud at that. Because they recognize immediately that there's a huge difference between relationships and coverage. I also add in the joke that there's often men in the room who go, that sounds pretty good to me. You know? Oh, there's a lot of turnover at the agency, you know. But it's funny, people laugh out loud about it, but that's fundamentally what we're doing. We're giving people coverage. We really literally think if just someone shows up, that's enough. And if that wasn't insulting enough, then we think it's about being consistent or keeping people busy. So we have people in these very active treatment schedules, and we've done in-service training with it. But imagine I were to arrive home and say to this woman, "Where's Sydney?" she says she's not here, but don't worry, we have you covered. And he go, well, do you know how to make a twice-baked potato? And her say, yes, as a matter of fact, Cindy did in-service training with us before she left, and now we all know how to make them in exactly the same fashion. And me going, well, what could be the problem, you know? I mean, again, it's the kind of thing we laugh at, but it's the basic mathematics of our entire service system. We really, that's what we do to people all the time. And then act surprised when it doesn't work. We surround people with strangers who come and go out of their life with regularity, and when they're upset about it, we think we just have to do better in-service training with the new people who come the next time. We don't laugh out loud at that. We practice it day in and day out. I've been with people that are 10 feet taller than I am, and who have a history of being violent, who can have a tiny little soul next to them who they're in relationship with, and they don't have any problems. A tiny person who's surrounded by giants can have all the problems in the world if they're not in a relationship with a person. It's so much about relationships. But it's not about how many people you have there, it's about who shows up. And is there a meaningful relationship between this person and those people showing up? So in our field, I think we just have a lot of people that are really busy running around, who never have time in their day to stop and spend time with people who use our services, and think that a process, another process, or another way of doing things, another training schedule, another, management information system is going to solve the problem. But the thing that really makes the difference, I think, over time is our commitment to people to get to know them in a meaningful sense, and hanging around long enough to hear a thing or two.
Okay, so
What's wrong?
I made a big mistake.
What did you...
Cartoons.
there are, he has, so just so you know, go to that site, deimagine.com. There are all kinds of great videos. I could show them to you all day. They would all be relevant to our discussion today. Some more relevant than others. That cartoon that we were just going to watch was really one where two people are talking about wanting to have a relationship, but their team feels that they need to go to classes first, and go through classes to learn about relationships before they can have a relationship. And it really is comedic. It's a comedy of those two saying that's the silliest thing we've ever heard, right? That we have to go to classes to learn to have a relationship,
Well, it might be the best.
and
A lot
so,
of people I know that needs them.
well, but it's not what we typically do in our lives, right? You meet somebody, you go on a date with them, you learn along the way. And the people who support you are your friends, your family, right? You ask advice of people you know, and they teach you. I mean, that's really been all of our experiences. I don't think any of us can say in our lives, we just had these initial relationships and we knew exactly what we were doing. Would everybody agree with that? And in fact, anybody who has young teenage kids, they tend to have these little brief short relationships, and then they're heartbroken when they don't work out, right? And so and then their families, their parents support them, and their friends support them, and they learn along the way. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't a place for that activity in which people are learning skills and social skills and that sort of thing. But I think sometimes we just make this assumption that you can't do this unless you take a class, right? So anyway, I digress, because that's a great website, and you can go, and he has a ton of videos that you can just watch that are pretty poignant. Let me go back to my slideshow here. That always, I think this is where I am from the current slide. Okay, so we support human beings, right? This is really what I think David Petoniak was saying. We support human beings. We strive to meet the needs of individuals. We work to understand individuals regardless of their means of communication. We empower people through choice making, and we assist people to feel and be safe. And that's going to look different for everybody. That's going to look different for everybody. So what does it mean to feel and be safe? Thoughts on that?
It's going to be different for everybody too.
Yeah, what does it mean then? What's the broad,
Having people you can trust.
having people you can trust around you? Having people you want around you?
The
Right?
security of knowing you're not going to be moved from place to place to place.
Yeah. Being listened to, right? Because if you're listened to, so if I like really loud, active environments, then I want to be in loud, active environments. If I can't cope with all that noise, then I need a different kind of environment. And again, I think that's true of all of us. Some of us can't cope in very quiet, kind of non-active environments. Some of us need that at least 10 times a day. Not that I'm projecting on myself, but you know, I mean, but you, right? I mean, that's true though, isn't that true? Some of us cannot cope if we're sitting still. We don't know what to do with ourselves. It agitates us. It makes us anxious, as David Petoniak was
Makes you
saying.
grumpy sometimes.
It makes you grumpy. That's right. And at some point, you got to get up and do something. And so, it's about listening to people, and it's about meeting people's needs where they are. So, and desires, needs and desires, which are maybe one and the same. So the belief of a positive culture is that each person has unique gifts to bring to each relationship. There is no place in the DD profession for the use of power, control, or coercion. You know, it's really what, if you're challenged and you're struggling and you're unhappy and you're expressing that unhappiness, which it's not hard to see when people are unhappy, right? And some people will, actually most people, if you're really unhappy, you're going to act out in some way, right? In relationships with a significant other, we try, right? To be patient, to be understanding, but at some point we may blow. Why?
You just get, nobody pays attention to you.
You're not being listened to. It's exactly the same. You're not being listened to. You don't feel like you're being listened to. Now, that other person, the other party, may totally disagree with that. But it doesn't really matter if they disagree with that, because that's your perception. So we need to pay attention to people's perceptions. Not just, of course I listened to that person. They said they wanted, what? They said they wanted a place to go where they could have friends. Well, we set up a place to go where they could have friends, right? But there's a different perception. You have a perception, that person has the perception, and we really need to start paying more attention to what is it that what are you perceiving here?
Yeah, but I've noticed most people with strong wills and mind kind of overpowers the other half that kind of calm, just go ahead and shrug things off their shoulder and they just go on and take it. Is it about?
For how long do they go on and take it?
I guess it depends on the person.
Some people shut down. Some people's dreams don't come true and they become depressed. And we know that there is a high percentage of people who have developmental disabilities who also have co-occurring mental health issues triggered by their life experiences as a result of having a developmental disability. And that existence of constantly being cared for and never having an opportunity to care for others. Constantly being the needy as opposed to the needed, right? That is not something you're born with, being needy as opposed to being needed. It's a thing that we create for people because we don't think they can. I mean, there's a difference between someone being allowed to and someone being able to, right? We don't think you can, so we don't provide you opportunities to be needed. And everybody needs to be needed. There's also another great video on that website of Deimagine where he's talking about that particular topic. So quality of life and possibilities should be the focus for each individual served, and the actions and thoughts of caregivers and professional supports must be intentional. And meaning we must intentionally be exploring what's going on with you, right? What your needs are, trying to better understand you. And this is not easy work. This is not something that, I would say a big part of our work days, Susan, is talking about this sort of subject. What's important to versus what's important for, how we accommodate people's needs and still keep you safe. I mean, this is not easy stuff for anybody, but it is something that we need to focus on and keep in mind and really ask ourselves, is our attitude a result of a culture that was created, or is it really,
A lot of it's culture.
yeah. So actions of a positive culture. We support one another to be humane in our work. We support and encourage a spirit of gentleness in our work and daily interactions. We fully invest ourselves in creating environments where each person can thrive. So we don't try to fit people into environments. We create environments where they can thrive, or we find environments where they're going to thrive. We focus our conversations on possibilities and quality of life. What's the need? What's the need? What's the need? Right? What's the desire? It's actually not even what's the need. It's what's the desire. Though David Petoniak always says that people who display what we would consider challenging behaviors they all have unmet needs or desires or that sort of thing. So we need to change our view of the person. People in our communities are brokenhearted, and some of you have seen this slide, I know, because I remember talking about it. Disenfranchised from society, isolated and lonely, traumatized by past abuse, abandonment, or mental illness. Now let's talk about what it means to be traumatized. Isolation is pretty traumatic too, right? Not having friends and not having relationships is pretty traumatic. What David was talking about, which was people covering as opposed to, supporting and caring and being there to help you accomplish your desires and be successful. Living lives without meaning or a sense of belonging without joy, and I think we talked about that. So if we believe all of this, what can we do as caregivers to help people feel safe and valued? And so we ask, is withholding things of importance to people or physically restraining them the answer? No, because all we're doing is what? Controlling and stopping people from doing something instead of empowering people to do something. In my counseling, I also am interning at another agency as a counselor. And one of the things I always tell my clients is I encourage them to ask questions. Nobody knows how to ask a question, it seems, right? So I'm just unhappy they want me to do this. They want me to, right? This is what they want to do to me, is what I hear a lot. Well, that's very revealing. So my answer is, what are your questions? What are your questions about this that I can answer and so that we can problem solve? Because if I don't know your questions, and when you ask a question, you're kind of forcing someone to answer, right? What are your questions? If you have a question somebody has to answer, if you just say okay, because you're powerful over me, then you're controlled. So you have to be empowered to ask questions, because then somebody has to answer, and if they don't have a good answer, then they're just being controlling. So, just some food for thought. My most recent revelation, by the way. All right. All right. So is eliminating an undesired behavior or achieving compliance enough, or do we want more for the person? And I think we just answered that, I just answered that question at least. I think we want more for the person, and we want a person to be empowered. We want people to be able to say, this is what I want and need, and we want to help them get that. Any comments? Okay, all right. So we need to understand the message. What do we know about people's histories? We've been doing this thing lately called a biographical timeline for some individuals, in which we go back to their birth. We literally put it on a wall on a big piece of paper, and we go back to people's birth, and the top part is about, these are the things in my life that have happened that have helped me move forward, essentially, or the really great things that have happened, or the really great relationships I have. And it's literally a timeline. And then the bottom part is, here are the really aversive things that have happened.
You never see that. You always see the top, you know, because my grandkids had just done that, where from the birth, so the age
Yeah,
of
yeah.
that. But they never do the other part. It's always, what do you remember? What's important to you? But there's never the,
Right, there's never a looking back to say, what happened to you?
no.
And so, one of the things that we are moving to is a philosophy and a discussion about that shifts from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. I mean, if we all look back in our lives, we have a sense of what happened to ourselves, and sometimes we don't, right? Those biographical timelines have been very happy, sorry, they haven't been all so happy, some of them have, very helpful in building empathy, where maybe teams and we did not have any, but when we really look back, we're like, oh, I see how that might have happened, right? So what kind of life do people have now? How might their disability affect their ability to understand what is happening and adjust the situation? You know, we don't always really study the disability either. So if someone has apraxia, who knows what that is? Okay. So can you explain what that is?
It can be a language and motor skill
Right?
where the motor pathways in the brain are not developed or connected correctly. So a lot of times it affects the speech, it affects motor planning as far as like handwriting. It also affects learning and the way that they connect and problem solve.
What we're moving from what's happy, right? Did I mean to say happy? No, I meant to say happened. So that's kind of that's an example of apraxia. So what comes out of people's mouths is not necessarily what they meant to come out of their mouth. Or somebody, you might ask somebody a question, and they might think, and think, and think, and all of a sudden you'll hear something, let's say like, I don't know, right? Because they gave up. And so so disability-related characteristics are only important in that we recognize how it impacts your ability to express your desires, to communicate, to engage in the things that you want to engage in, and then we got to get creative. Right? What do you need? And confidence. This is just one example. But then confidence is a problem. Because I'm working so hard at this, I'm just going to give up.
Well, and sometimes the speech is not understandable,
Right.
and so then they're embarrassed to even try to talk because people can understand.
Right. And so that person may fixate on one thing because they can practice, right? At least I can talk about this, at least I can talk about this, at least I can talk about this. And so it's just important, I think, that this isn't really a training about apraxia, it's really a training about being sensitive to the developmental disabilities that people have, and then doing our best to adapt so that that person can be empowered. So what stresses might they face every single day, and is there enough joy to balance out the stresses? Well, the impact of, let's say, someone who has apraxia could be pretty stressful during the day, and then what are we doing? And what are we doing to just be really transparent about the fact that we see that? And we know that. It's not a secret. I know that this is hard for you, right? It's okay to do that. It's okay to say that. And so what would you do in that person's situation? You would do the same thing, right? If you've tried to mountain climb 10 times and you're just not strong enough, you're just gonna say, I'm not doing that, right?
Right.
Even if you really want to. Even if you really want to, I'm just not doing that. It's actually a lesson for all of us, right? Okay, let me see if I can find this one. This is a really cool, which I closed out of, so give me a minute. This is a really cool video, I thought, that is about building empathy, that I saw at a recent all-day training on the new, about the new behavior support rule. And I just thought it was so great, and I couldn't believe I'd never seen it before. Don't you love it when I kind of. I see, and I don't perceive it as depressing at all. I perceived it as very hopeful. And I think we focus on what's depressing. We don't focus on what's hopeful. That video had many things in it that were not depressing. But the depressing stuff overwhelms us and bewilders us.
Yeah.
Some of the depressing stuff impacts us because we can relate. And that's emotional. But the reality is that it's kind of hopeful. It makes us realize that we're not the only ones in our own heads, right? We're not the only ones with things that are going on up here as we're walking around throughout the day. And that is true of everybody in this room, everybody who we support, everybody who you pass on the street. There's something else behind what you see. And, it's that whole two people coming up the escalator, benign tumor, malignancy, right? And that's just the reality. We are communal.
Well, and I think it says that if we can recognize what people are going through, we can make things better for them. Even if what they're going through is a terminal illness, if we can stop and consider what they're going through, we can be kinder, we can make a day, brighter for them. And that's what you have to focus on, because if you focus on the negative.
Yeah, and also be okay with not knowing, but knowing there's something behind that. People will be much more comfortable being forthcoming with you if you behave in a way that gives them permission. So if we say stop, and that's all we say, right, then we have not given people permission. If that makes any sense. Any more thoughts about that video?
People don't always want you to fix anything either, just
They want you to be there.
listen. Yeah, be there and listen.
Right, and they don't want to change necessarily what they're doing.
They don't want you to treat them any different.
Correct.
Right.
They just want you to treat them like a person that's what you know knows.
And again, what David Petoniak, which coincidentally there's a quote here, I really didn't cue that up, though I'd like you to believe I did, that I planned on that. But what he would like you to, and I just lost my train of thought, so we'll get back to it. But he says, suppressing behavior without understanding something about the life the person is living is disrespectful and counterproductive. Right? We have to understand something about the life you're living, or we're really not showing we care. People with severe reputations what do we mean by severe reputation?
Maybe they might be known for displaying some disruptive behavior or some type of behavior that's...
Are our teachers, if we are wise enough to learn from them? Their behavior, protests and civil disobedience, if you like, are often telling us, you're not giving me the help I need. You are hurting me. Your ideas may be good, but your actions aren't, and you can do better. So it's our goal to focus on a better life for the person, look beyond the outward behavior, and use the messages to understand what the person needs. So it's not about what you're doing, it's about what you want and what you need. What's important to and what's important for you. And I throw that out, I keep throwing what's important to and what's important for you out to you for a couple different reasons. One is that it really does fit this. Two is because you're going to hear it more and more and more and more and more, because it's what the Department of Developmental Disabilities is supporting now. And that's the terminology that's getting thrown out, and that's the terminology that's being used. So it's helpful if we say it, so that when you hear it, you're not like, what's this, right? What are we doing now? So focus on helping the person find meaning and purpose in their relationships and daily activities. Provide compassion and support as you engage the person in activities aimed at discovering and achieving their best life. And I think that thing about discovering is so important. It's a discovery, right? I discover things about myself every day. You know, people make that joke, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, right? People say that all the time when they're in their 50s or their 80s, right? I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. Well, I certainly still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. You know, there's always something more. There's always something more we want. There's always something more we want to do. It isn't like, okay, thank goodness we got that person settled. Because I'm not sure people settle. I'm not sure it's in our nature to settle. We always want something
There's
else.
always something ahead of you or your
Right.
agenda that you're wanting, even though you may not know it at the time, but there's always something, a goal that you're going to.
Right. And you know, we often say to people, well, I thought you were happy here. It's like, instead of saying, wow, you know, are you done with this? Or, you know, is this not what you want to be doing? I mean, anybody willing to share an example of something like
My
that?
daughter is an RN at Bethesda. She just now went to Clermont Hospital. It wasn't because she wasn't happy, she loved it there. It's just Clermont offered her more opportunities in different areas where she wanted to go.
Right.
She misses her old place. She wants to go back badly.
Oh, really?
Oh, bad.
Yeah.
But she's looking forward to the new experiences that she hasn't been able to do.
It's discovery.
Yeah.
Some
And I
people
think she likes it.
some people might argue that she's just acting out and doesn't really know what she wants. So we
Well,
might
she
want
knows
to,
she
we might
knows
just
what
want to
she
tell her.
wants, but she knows she wants a different experience.
Right,
In a different area.
Right. Some people would argue that she's just never satisfied.
Well, yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
No.
I really am joking.
No. She's satisfied, but no.
But that is what we do, right? I mean, that is what we do.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the kinds of things we throw at people. Well, you're just never satisfied. He's never satisfied.
Her father says, why don't you just stay where you're at because you're happy?
Right.
She says, yeah, I'm happy, but it's not getting my mind, it's not getting everything
Right.
else. She's stuck where she's at.
Right.
But not really, but she
Yeah.
wanted to grow.
Right. And so I think sometimes it's helpful, which is why I love that video, because it just brings it home to all of us. You know, it doesn't compartmentalize. This is really how life works. This is how life goes. And we need to be aware of that internally so that we can respond in helpful ways to other people. Quote from Desmond Tutu, "We humans can tolerate suffering, but we cannot tolerate meaninglessness." It is a very good quote. We should probably stencil these quotes all over the building here, you know. I was on Mackinac Island once, and there was a hotel I stayed in, and they had all these sorts of quotes stenciled all over. It was a very cool place, and you would just walk around this hotel, and they had all these kinds of quotes stenciled in there, and very cool. A lesson in being human while you're on vacation. Okay.
My sister-in-law does that. She takes care of kids. She went to school for disability, teaching them. And her house is all over. It's plaques and writings. Wherever you go, of different things.
Right. Things that
You
matter.
stand there and just read that and go back and read it again, you get a different meaning.
Right. Things that matter. Right? So, we need to seek to change ourselves. What does a person see in us? Do interactions with us bring about fear or a sense of being safe, anxiety or a sense of calm, distrust or trust, rejection or acceptance, sadness or joy? And we also have to be kind to ourselves, right? We can't beat ourselves up. We're human too. So one day you might say, wow, I think Sally really fears me. You know? And your real question is, what do I do about that? What do I do to change that? Why is that happening? It's really that. It's not really, you know, I'm a horrible person. That's not what this is at all trying to communicate. You know, and we all do things that cause distrust at times. And if we get really busy, we might communicate rejection. And it is hard to clean that up, but it's also human.
You know, the other thing, Rachel, is that the trust goes two ways. We need to trust the individual to make the right decision.
Okay, you did it. You're fine.
What did I do?
Let's see now, let's do this now. Let's see how fast I can, if I can't find it quickly, I won't. See if this is it. Oh, no, that's not it. We'll just watch some of this.
So literally, when we only need other people and don't have a way to make a contribution to other people, the brain responds as if it's distressed. When we are needed by other people, the brain goes, this is good, solid footing to be on. The problem, I think, for a lot of people who experience disabilities is they've gone through a maturation process in which they're always on the needy side of the equation. It starts when kids are born, and within hours of being identified as being a child who experiences a disability, we have sometimes early intervention services that show up and convey to the parents of that child, your kid's the needy one, and if you don't find out about their disability, they'll fall off the face of the earth. There are conversations early on about our funding system, our system of services. This is before a child's, out of the hospital in the first or second days of their lives. And then they get into programs that are designed to fix them, where the questions are, what's wrong with you? How do we fix you? What do we do with you if we can't fix you? Those are the fundamental questions of our service system historically. They get into the education system, the special education system. It's the same set of questions. What's wrong with this kid? How do we fix this kid? What do we do with this kid if we can't fix them? And then that's the question awaiting them while they're on the waiting list. In the adult system, what's wrong with you? How do we fix you? What do we do with you if we can't fix you? We even have funding streams that are set up saying the more you need, the more funding will your provider get, which means there's kind of a vested interest in the provider system of you being as needy as possible. We won't say this, we don't like to think of it that way, but it literally financially gets paid off. The more needy people are, the more the system will invest in their services. But imagine just going through this maturation process, this indoctrination process, this enculturation process. Imagine going through that your entire life and coming out the other side anybody but a needy person. One reason I think that people who experience disabilities often have trouble in relationships is they don't understand the concept of reciprocity, that sort of give and take that's necessary in relationships. In any healthy relationship, there's a kind of balance that is felt by both parties, that I give sometimes more than you do, but over time I get as much as I give. It feels that way in a healthy relationship over time. But imagine that you never learned about that, you never had any practice of that, and what you did learn was me being the needy one is how I show up. It's not a good formula for developing enduring relationships. What we all get in our indoctrination, or I shouldn't say indoctrination process, the enculturation process, our maturation process, is a kind of expectation that while our parents will help us with those things we need, we also have responsibility to the family, to our brothers and sisters, to our mothers and fathers, and we practice it. My parents made us go to church when we didn't want to go to church. They made us, sit at birthday parties for our aging aunts, though we found that too boring. They taught us that we were to do chores around the house, have responsibility for things, and there wasn't any kind of thinking twice about it. It was an expectation. It's part of how I grew up, and it's part of what I think Cindy and I felt was the most important thing to teach our boys, is they are a part of something bigger than themselves.
Okay, so he goes on about this, and he's not suggesting that we're directive and that sort of thing. He talks about, he says, someone has a seizure, you know, when they're finished with the seizure, you have to tell them to take out the garbage. And then he laughed. He's like, well, I don't exactly mean that, right? He said, I don't exactly mean that. But what he's saying is, your disability cannot be all you. You're not needy because you have a disability. You're needy because no one taught you how to belong. No one taught you how to be a part of something bigger than yourself. He talks about people as being a pack, right? Part of the pack. If you don't feel like you're a part of the pack, then you can see where mental health issues might come into things, come into the situation, right? Because then you feel like you're separated from the pack, as he talks about.
The other thing would be adapting whatever it is we're doing to a way that that person can do it.
Right.
Stopping to take the time to
So,
figure out how to make it work.
Leslie, do you want to talk any more about that? Just asking.
Well, the young lady who lives with me was at SODC and before that Orient. She's now been home with me for over 2 years. One of her newest accomplishments is that she now has 2 hours of alone time, which a lot of people would never believe that would ever happen. When I say about trusting her, she wanted to go outside, she wanted to take a walk. She now takes a walk down the street. I had to trust her to make the right decision and go down the end of the street where there's no cars, no anything. That was a major trust. It came down to, health and safety, but at the same time, I had to believe enough in her to say, do you want to try it? If it doesn't work, we won't do it again. Her other big accomplishment lately is making spaghetti sauce, including browning the hamburger. And that came down to my mom handed her a wooden spoon. Well, that didn't work too well. So I went and got her a bigger spoon where she could flip the hamburger. You gave her $1 million, because we let her. She now takes her medicine by herself because her question was, well, why do I have to do that? Well, because it's time. Now she has a medi set. I set it up once a
Okay,
week.
now may I stop? It's what's important to and what's important for.
Mhm.
What's important for,
She wants control. She wanted to control her own.
what's important to. What's important for is that somehow medication
Right.
is
she
a part
needed
of
the
this
medicine.
scenario.
Right. So I went and got her medi set that the alarm goes off. Okay, the alarm goes off. Well, maybe it goes off at 7 in the morning and she's not up till 8. Okay, if you and I don't get up till 8, we're not going to take it till 8. But she knows it's sitting there, it's ready. She'll get it when she gets up.
Yeah.
Takes her own baths now entirely by herself. She just does really everything herself and helps. And one thing she did one day, she's like, I can do that. Okay, so we went to the kitchen. I couldn't figure. She wanted to help me wash dishes. Well, the first time the dishes weren't clean, but I didn't care. It was the fact that she did it. So then we adapted. We got her a scrubby with a handle and showed her how to do it properly. But you've given her that sense of.
And it's a perspective, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's a perspective you've got. That's why, you remember earlier in this PowerPoint, we talked about it being intentional? It has to start out as an intentional perspective. Then it becomes just kind of a natural way that we see people.
And the
And
other.
we respond to people.
And the being needed was so cool. I was in 2 accidents in a week's time. She took care of me without me asking her to. It just meant the world to her to cover me up, to bring me the remote, to do the little things that just, she knew that I was in pain.
Right? So, needing to be needed. It's a need. It's not, it is truly a human need, the need to be needed. Is this where I am? So, who here remembers John McGee, who is no longer with us? He did pass away. He had a philosophy called gentle teaching. And there are many agencies and county boards in Ohio who have taken on gentle teaching as their philosophy, as opposed to CPI, MAN, and that sort of thing. They've actually solely taken on gentle teaching, and I'm not going to get into that too much, but you can look into it. It really is about unconditional acceptance and valuing people. It's about nonviolence. It's about nonviolence as well. Our acceptance of the person is not contingent upon their compliance or changing their behavior. The goal is to change our beliefs about the person and practice gentleness in all circumstances. And we commit to doing whatever it takes to help the person feel safe and valued without expecting anything in return. And, you know, the dishes were dirty, who cares?
Yep.
Right? There's no health and safety risk there. We
That's
can,
right.
we can fix that. We can fix that. So, Mother Teresa says, never let anyone come to you without coming away better and happier. Our only real work is in human interaction. We've talked a lot about that today, and your greatest gift to a troubled person is yourself and your belief that they can succeed and achieve their goals. Let the person know that it is good to be together and that they are safe with you, and focus on this moment and this interaction. I mean, that's all we really want people to do, right? I mean, sometimes I pull people out of meetings. I pulled LaMonica out of a meeting the other day. Would you say I really had to talk to you at that moment in time? That was very important that I talked to you right then.
I think it was important for you.
It was important for me. I needed to resolve this. I needed to talk through something that LaMonica was involved in, and I knew she could help me. Right? And so she did that. And I said, no, you're busy. In fact, she was helping with daycare that day. She had a baby in her hands. And then she brought the baby out, and I said, no, we can't have the baby. So she brought the baby, then she gave me all of her time. Right? And you know, so it's focusing on this moment and this interaction. Obviously, this is important to you. So if I can, I will, right? And we'll figure it out.
And Rachel, what it says too about knowing that the person is safe with you, the biggest thing that I've seen is this young lady, her whole thing was, I hit you, I hurt you, you go away, I never see you again. And she had never hurt me in years, and then when we were making the transition to home, she did. And I looked at her, I said, you can do anything you want. I said, but I still love you, and you know that made all the difference in the world.
Yep, change. It was a game changer, wasn't it?
It was, because she realized, I don't care what happened, I'm not giving up on you. And so
This
many of
is
these
your
people-
home. It's not my home. It's your home. It's our home.
Well, and even I went up to Warren County one day, and just, you know, you don't know this person. Well, this gentleman, I guess unintentionally I flinched because he reached out, and he says, I'm not going to hurt you. And you know, that hurt me so badly because I felt, and I really didn't do it intentional, but it's like it makes you think. In his mind, everybody's afraid of him. And that just really makes you think.
And then, so how do we react to that? Because like I said earlier, we are not perfect, right? Things like that happen. That was a involuntary reaction. Like, so Leslie had no reaction, no control over
intention,
that
yeah.
reaction or intention. So what do we do when that happens and then someone says, I'm not going to hurt you, which was really given back? That was a very nice, you know, then what do we do?
I actually took his hand and just talked to him and said, you know, I apologize. I just, you know, just reacted
Right.
without, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, wow, I don't know why I reacted that way.
Yeah.
It just happened. Right? So we have to be human. And we have to be human to people. You know, we can't pretend. So we humans want to be together. We only isolate ourselves when we're hurt by others. But alone is not our natural state. Today we live in an unnatural state, separating ourselves rather being together. I think we're moving away from that, right? But people want to be together. They want to have some sort of relationship. So what can we do to support a positive culture in our work? Choose to accept the challenges, to think about your work within the context of a positive culture. Be an advocate for a positive culture within your community. Right? That whole, I recognize that everybody around me has their own thing going on. Honest conversations about why negative interactions occur and how shifting our beliefs about people can create new approaches and create a sense of community. So I want to talk about something. So at the Clermont County Board of Developmental Disabilities, along with a few other agencies in the area, Envision Ohio, St. Aloysius, we have adopted something called the Sanctuary Model. And it's really a way of doing business. It's a trauma-informed model that reminds us that people come with their own stuff, things happen, the way we treat people impacts them long-term. Good? Okay.
Just recognizing what people have been through, both on the employee level and on the level of the people that we serve, so that, you know, we can be more understanding, more empathetic. And
So part of this process is something called a community meeting, which is a very intentional way of trying to adapt our culture to this philosophy. And it feels weird. It feels weird. We go around the room and we ask 3 questions of each person, right? I would say to Leslie, how do you feel today?
Okay. You're wanting more, though. I knew that was good.
I don't want to cover, I want
No, yeah, okay.
just 2 words.
Relaxed, but knowing I've got a busy afternoon.
So what's your goal?
To get through the day and go home and relax again.
And who's going to help you? And who's going to help you?
Honestly, my staff. We work as a team.
Okay, so those are the 3 questions, and then Leslie would go and say,
How do you feel today?
Pretty good with lots on my agenda.
And the next question is how?
what's your goal?
What's your goal?
To accomplish as much as I possibly can, and at the end of the day, know that I did all that I could.
Okay, and who's going to help you with that?
Not really, no.
Nobody's going to help you? So we won't do that, but we might do it another time. Thinking about doing it. Okay,
That would be
so, what?
That would be neat.
So the reason we do that is so that we are taking the temperature of the room. You know, right? I'm going to ask you these questions, and it's going to give me some information for the remainder of the day as your coworker, right? So if you say, I have such a backlog on my desk, you know, I just need to get this stuff off the desk. One of the things the dean said this morning during our community meeting was, you know, then I might know not to bother you too much. Or if I do bother you, I might say, wow, I'm sorry, I know you have a lot on your plate. It's a very human way of being with other people, whether you're in the workplace or anybody else, anywhere else. And it's weird. It feels weird to do
Very
it.
uncomfortable.
And it feels a little bit contrived. But when we are doing something outside of our comfort zone that's very structured and intentional, it feels contrived a little bit, right? The hope is that it becomes meaningful to us, and that we change a little bit. We have a new perspective about how we do things. And so every Monday at 10 a.m., at 9 a.m., all of our departments within the CSS department, we're doing it as a whole agency, but all departments do it differently. But within the CSS, wherever you are, you're having a community meeting with 4 or more people. But you're having a community meeting, and if you're by yourself, you're going and finding a group and having a community meeting. Are you doing that?
Yeah, we do them on Tuesday.
Oh, very cool. I did not know that. Okay. So, what can we do? Honest conversations about why negative interactions occur and how shifting our beliefs about people can create new approaches. Part of our sanctuary model is that we have a core team that meets twice a month. And we talk about these sorts of things. And create a sense of community. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. Focus on supporting the person in living their best life. Not the best life that we think they should have, but their best life, which is a little bit of a shift sometimes, because we often talk about what people need, right? So-and-so needs this. Practice unconditional acceptance. Make a commitment to gentleness and nonviolence. Find ways to create a positive culture for direct caregivers.
And for caregivers or whoever is in that person's life to know that sometimes you're not going to undo that past history. Hoarding food, wearing layers of clothing. So, you know, sometimes there's just things that maybe are not appropriate in our mind, but there's a reason behind it, and you just kind of
And this behavior support rule, which I'm going to talk about here in just a minute, speaks very clearly about that, the new rule. So I think that any approach that enhances a person's sense of values and dignity is worth a lifetime of trying. Right? We've got a lifetime. People have a lifetime. Right? It's okay. It all doesn't have to happen today, and people don't have to just reach all their goals today. It's a lifetime of trying. It's, let's get a scrub brush and try the scrub brush. It's all of those things. It's the little things, it's the big things that happen as a result of those
I've
things.
known her for 8 years, so.
Yeah. So what kind of community do you want to create? You get to decide what legacy you will leave. How do you want your work to be remembered? And how do you want others to feel in your presence, in your caregiving community? These are all questions that we ask that help us think a little bit more about this philosophy. And that's it for that. But if we pull out this shift in practice form, you have two things. I gave you a copy of the entire new rule, behavior support rule. Okay? And then I gave you this. This document is really a piece of a PowerPoint that this was actually developed by the Department of Developmental Disabilities and the Ohio Association of oh, I knew this was going to happen to me, that I was going to. The OA, not the Ohio Association of Provider. I thought it was on here. What?
Oh, I know.
Yeah, maybe. Hang on, I'm gonna look it up. Anyway, I didn't create this. It was a part of a all-day training that I went to, and then I'll tell you who created it here in a minute. But it was a part of an all-day training that I went to, in which the new behavior support rule was really reviewed in detail, and the philosophy of the new behavior support rule was clarified. So essentially, we're talking about a shift in practice, all right? It's not, how many people here were familiar with the old rule? Even a little bit? A little bit. What were some things that stood out about the old rule? Anybody? Well, some of the things that stood out about the old rule was that we couldn't intervene unless there was a risk to health and safety. Okay? So we couldn't apply restrictive measures, rights restrictions, or physical interventions, or that sort of thing, unless there was a risk to health and safety. Really, this rule clarifies that a little bit more. It's a little clearer, I think, about what the intention of the original rule was. And so it changes the way people are going to do business in terms of supporting other people in this field. So what's the difference? It limits the use of restrictive measures. Well, it always limited the use of restrictive measures. But it limits the use of restrictive measures in terms of imminent risk. Right? So what is imminent risk?
Here and now.
Right now. Maybe tomorrow. What?
Immediate danger.
Yeah, immediate. It's not, it's right now, maybe tomorrow, right? Every time you eat, you aspirate, you go to the hospital and you have pneumonia and it's life-threatening. Could be considered somewhat imminent if that happens every time. How about someone who has diabetes and isn't following the diet that's prescribed by the doctor? Is that an imminent risk? No. No. And that's what's different about this rule.
Why is it? Honestly,
So, because it's a long-term risk,
well, yeah.
right? It's not imminent. If you eat a candy bar,
Drops at that moment, you have to.
if you eat a candy bar, you're not going to go to the hospital because you're diabetic.
Okay.
It's going to impact your sugar, and there's protocol for that. But if you go to the doctor and you have diabetes and your doctor says, here's the diet I recommend, do you have to follow it? You do not have to follow it. And this rule respects that. And so, if somebody smokes 10 cigarettes a day, 10 packs of cigarettes a day, what's the risk?
Long term,
Long term, what's the risk?
lung cancer.
Right, not imminent. Not imminent.
Maybe COPD.
What?
COPD.
COPD is a little bit more imminent. Yes.
Unless they're
COPD.
smoking around you.
Hmm?
Unless they're smoking around you.
Because of the risk to you? Yeah, then that is something that as a provider, if someone wanted to hire you, you would just say, one of the things that I'm not okay with is you smoking around me, they may not pick you, right? Because they have the right to smoke. So that's really how that's looked at, right? Because yes, it is their right to smoke. It is your right to smoke, say to someone, you can't smoke in my car, nor in my house, right? But it's still their choice to smoke, and it's their choice to get the services that they want that kind of, fits what they feel they need. So it applies, this rule also applies to all environments in which specialized services are provided. That includes any environment that is designed to serve an individual with developmental disabilities or provide specialized services to someone with developmental disabilities, except for the Ohio Department of Education, which is governed by the Ohio Department of Education. And that is delineated in the rule very clearly. So that includes ICFs. That includes like a place like Stepping Stone Center, right? That anyone who's receiving any DODD funding or funding, Medicaid funding or county board funding or, though with that said, if we are funding I won't even get into that because I think it's still in question. It outlines who can conduct assessments and develop strategies, and this is a big change. So you can no longer, in this field, develop behavior support strategies. All right, especially those that incorporate restrictive measures, unless you have, and there is a grandfather clause, which you'll hear in just a minute. You're a psychiatrist, you're a psychologist, you're licensed, social worker, professional counselor, that sort of thing, or you have a bachelor's or master's degree with 3 years of experience developing and implementing behavior support plans. And that is kind of the grandfather kind of clause. It feels like it at least. But, so that's a huge difference. That's saying, you know what? The person who completes an assessment of your behavior, right, and develops a plan has to have some higher education and expertise in the area. It can't just be us saying, I think this is what's best. It establishes new requirements for human rights committees. So the committee has to have an equal number of professionals, and individuals served or supported by the DD system, or a parent or guardian. So there are 6 people on my committee. There are now 3 who are parents or guardians. There's 1 individual we serve, there are 2 parents or guardians, and there are 3 individuals who are professionals. It's not just people in the DD system, but there's a social worker from SODC, our principal here, and then there's somebody else. Oh, and then there's one of our adult services direct managers. So we have an equal number. So that's a change. What's not different? We have to implement positive non-aversive strategies first. You still need informed consent. You still need to report unapproved behavior support. There are still prohibited measures, which I gave you a copy of the rule. I think it's worth everyone to read it. And you still can and should intervene in a crisis situation to ensure health and safety. So this rule isn't saying if someone runs into the middle of the street and you don't have a behavior support plan, which was assessed by a PhD, that you can't intervene, right? That's not what it's saying. It's saying do that and then complete an MUI saying this happened. And then, the team needs to get together and problem solve. Language from the rule, restrictive measures are used only when necessary to keep people safe. Individuals with developmental disabilities are supported in caring and responsive manner that promotes dignity, respect, and trust, with recognition that they are equal citizens and with the same rights and personal freedoms granted to Ohioans without developmental disabilities. And they mean it. This is what people mean. I mean, this is what the developers of this plan mean, that people have the same rights as you and me or anybody, which means that we can't just restrict you because I'm afraid of what's going to happen. I.e., I want to walk up to the sign, right? And it is our job to figure out how to help you with that. Even when we have a little bit of evidence that it may not be safe, we have to still keep you safe, but we can't just say you can't do that. We have to help you with that. Services and supports are based on an understanding of an individual and the reason for his or her actions. So that's where, we talked about that biographical timeline and really understanding the underlying causes and what we can do to help mitigate that. Effort is directed at creating opportunities for individuals to exercise choice in matters affecting their everyday lives. Do you see how this really fits this positive culture initiative? And that it took a long time, because the positive culture initiative, it's terrible. I walked in here not really remembering the year that this was introduced, but I would say 5 at least, maybe 6.
2011 was the first time I went to a training.
2000 what?
11.
You remember that? Wow. Okay.
That's when I started here.
Okay. Effort is directed at creating opportunities for individuals to exercise choice in matters affecting their everyday lives. We have to listen to people. And supporting individuals to make choices that yield positive outcomes. We already talked about the foundation.
Rachel, can I make a comment too, how I approach the guardianship too, is I make the big decisions. We make every decision together. I make the big ones.
So this is the shift, right? We make every decision together. Do you know how many meetings I sit in on where individuals are not in their meetings? A lot.
And Rachel can attest to this, our meetings would take longer because she's there, but it's every bit worth it. It's every bit worth it. And one thing I did too is there's the feeling that, well, they have a disability, she was going to have surgery on her toe. Well, that means we need to put her out. Well, if it's me, are you going to put me out? No, we'll give you twilight. And I fought with them, and it's like, no, you will not. You're not going to totally sedate her just because she has a disability. And then they looked at me too. Well, when did you take your medicine this morning? When did you have a drink last night? And they looked at me, I said, she knows what she's telling you.
Yeah.
Let her tell you. I had to give them the list of medicine, but everything else, and when she was done, they're like, oh my God. And the big thing there is trust.
So what did you do there? What you did there is you didn't just trust her. You actually advocated in a way that changed the perspective of other people, right? Also,
she made the
which is pretty
choice
powerful.
she made the choice to have the surgery or not. It was an elective, if you want to call it that, and it could be done, or she could wear little pads on her toe. And I asked her what she wanted to do.
So, thank you very much. So what DODD is saying is that there's going to be a very limited number of plans with restrictive measures. Very limited. It has to have something to do with direct and serious risk of harm or legal sanction being very, very specific. Incarceration, arrest, eviction. That's it. That's what legal sanction is. and most plans will not meet the criteria for restrictive measures. All plans need to be developed using a person-centered context. So what is a person-centered context, right? It's very specific. It begins with a comprehensive understanding of the person. It empowers informed choice and increases independence. It involves trusted support, increases opportunities for success, and it increases community membership, enhances natural supports, and ensures plans and services are driven by the person. And so that sounds very similar to what we've been talking about, right? And it's taken this long to really bring it,
Out.
to bring it here, to bring it where we should have been 5 or 6 years ago, at least. Probably a whole lot more than that. But, so we had one philosophy, but we were doing something else. Listen, and just to be quite honest, there are individuals in our system right now that I have written plans for that will not be approved per this new rule. And we're in the process of removing those restrictions from people's plans. Carefully, but we're in the process of doing that. Anything that involves food restrictions, smoking, things that are really not life-threatening are in question. Anywhere where there's a lock on a cabinet, on drawers, on a fence, on a gate, on a door, are in question.
So locked knife drawers?
Knives? Well, it's really about what's the immediate risk. You might have an immediate risk. So yes, I still have
think it
people.
is immediate
Yes.
risk. I think ultimately will it happen?
Teams
If
need
it's not approached properly.
to talk about where the data is, where's the proof of the risk. And if you really can't come up with it, then you probably don't have it, right? You have to have the proof of risk, and then even if you have the proof of risk, you have to do something to mitigate that risk, right? You have to do something. You can't just lock up knives.
Could the
You
knives
can't-
be placed up higher?
No, that is locking them up.
Okay, I'm just, okay, okay.
If you put if someone uses a wheelchair and you have knives on the top of the refrigerator, you've essentially locked them up. So,
Because he can't reach it.
yeah, you're really stopping someone from accessing those independently, and so it's a restriction. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, next page. Okay. So, the people who support, now this is actually written to individuals. The people who support you should know you really well. The people who support you should give you information to help you make choices. The people who support you can help you be a part of your community. Friends and family can also be people who support you, and you should make choices about your service plans. And let me say that if somebody smokes cigarettes and their legal guardian says, I don't want them smoking cigarettes, I cannot stop them from smoking cigarettes. That's another thing that I think is really important to point out. So the legal guardian doesn't get to say this person can't eat this kind of food. I can't stop that person from doing that. So just wanted, that's a very important piece of this as well, that has been emphasized in all of the trainings that I've been to or heard. Because there's no imminent risk, there's no reason for it, there's no, except power and control, and you've got to be very, and so that's really important for it. That's really important. A person-centered approach identifies outcomes that achieve a balance between, remember this, what is important to the person, as well as what is important for the person. And, it almost makes sense for teams to sit down with a chart, important to, important for. And then what are we going to do to bridge these?
But, Rachel, not only, the point is that, so a person smokes 10 packs of cigarettes a day, but they might not have the understanding of the long-term effects, but you can still educate that person
Right.
and let them make that choice.
That's exactly right. That's the key. You have to educate. You have to make sure that people understand, but you have to do all of those things. And that's what you have to have in a plan,
Right.
if it's going to be approved.
And they can talk to their healthcare provider. You know, there's things that you can, you just don't say, well, that's their choice and I'm done.
Right. And that is kind of where the dignity and respect comes in. You have to respect people enough to help and assume that they understand, right? You can make some of these decisions on your own.
And don't ever assume that somebody with a disability doesn't understand. I'm telling you, that is where the...
Assume is a bad word.
So what is important to a person includes what makes them feel happy, content, fulfilled, and comforted. What is important for a person includes health and safety, wellness and prevention, emotional health, things that help the person be a valued member of their community, which is what someone said, and I said it was important too, but it's not before. Because David Petoniak said that's important for people, right? All right. Questions, discussions? That was a very abbreviated introduction to the new behavior support rule. Like I said, I gave you the whole rule to look over and read. I want
Throw the old
to,
one away?
what?
I can throw the old ones away?
The old one's gone. The new rule went into effect January 1st, 2015. I want to let, so one of the reasons for reviewing this new rule is partially to say, wow, look what we've done, right? We're there. We're working towards a pretty cool realization about people and their lives and what we need to do to support people. But also because it could be a stressful time. It could be a stressful time over the next few months in which we're trying to adapt and adjust to this new perspective and way of looking at things. It's going to be harder for some people than others. Be aware that not only are providers of services going to struggle, but I am struggling. Not because I don't believe in it, but because we have a lot of changes to make. We have a lot that we have to do to reconcile emotionally with ourselves and what we've been doing over the years. But this is kind of what happens, right? We as human beings grow and develop. We evolve. Our perspectives evolve. Perfect example is there was a time when people were warehoused. People are not warehoused to that degree anymore. And we're even moving further and further and further and further and further away of segregated environments. That is very hard. That's very hard for families. That's very hard for caregivers because people feel safe in segregated communities and less vulnerable.
They did. More understood.
Right, and so less vulnerable. So this is a growth experience. We're all struggling a little.
And
Because this is our culture, this is what we believe.
And even the individuals themselves could feel stressed because they're used to that, some type of physical intervention that they get something from, that there's going to need to be a replacement there.
And also insulated environments, right? But this is what happens in life, and this is how we evolve, and this is how we grow. And none of this, so it's not, so what I worry about is this becomes a very kind of experience because it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Whoa. But we all just need to work on this together and realize that it's something that we're all kind of grappling with and learning about. And I know we'll get there because in our lifetime, most of us in this room, we've already experienced major changes that we've adapted to. And we've all survived. So that's all I have. That's all I have. Thanks.
I have a couple quick announcements. One being, I'm going to try, I have the certificates here, and all you have to do is write your name on it. And I have nothing to get. Okay.
Would you email your ballot?
Yeah. And I don't know if you've noticed that, we're kind of just every 2 months, we're going to have offered trainings now as opposed to every month. And you can tell by the attendance today, that's probably a better idea.